A Star Wars Story is the new Star Wars film from Disney that's set right before the events of Star Wars A New Hope. This movie focuses on the band of rebels that we read about in that opening crawl that plotted against the Empire to steal the Death Star plans and bring them to the rebellion. One of these rebels being Jyn Erso, played by Felicity Jones, who's a very important role in this movie because her father, Galen Erso, played by Mads Mikkelsen, has had a huge hand in the development of this big planet killer weapon. I don't think this is much of a surprise to anyone when I say that this was my most anticipated film of the entire year. After Disney knocked it out of the park last year with The Force Awakens, I couldn't wait to see not else what they could do with the other saga films coming out, but also what they were going to do with these planned anthology movies that they kept bringing up. One of them being the Han Solo prequel, and maybe a Boba Fett movie. I'm not entirely sure about that one though, that's kind of rumored. And if anyone was going to deliver us a great anthology film, it was going to be Gareth Edwards, the director of Godzilla, and I actually really love that movie. I know that's kind of an unpopular opinion to say that, but I can't help it. I really did enjoy that movie, and I couldn't wait to see what Gareth Edwards was going to do with this movie. I was hoping that him teaming up with Disney was going to deliver something extremely special, and guess what? He absolutely delivered with this movie. Rogue One was excellent, and it is the first good Star Wars prequel that we've ever gotten. Finally, we have a legitimate good one. Revenge of the Sith is okay, it's not that good. This one though, finally, a good Star Wars prequel. Like the other Star Wars movies, this movie has a great roster of characters for us to follow. One of them being Jyn Erso, played by Felicity Jones, who I really did enjoy in this movie. This was a much better movie for Felicity Jones than that other movie she was in 2 months ago, which we're not going to mention right now. Her character actually had the most backstory out of anyone in the movie, which actually helped us sympathize with her as a character, because there are also some moments that they showed where it kind of requires her character to get a little emotional, and I couldn't help but feel sad for her and kinda with her. And I felt these emotions with this character because of the backstory that they developed for us and how they overall presented it. Even other characters like Cassian Andor, played by Diego Luna, when I first saw him in the trailers, I thought he looks like the kinda uptight rebel character, you know, all of a sudden he's working with this character who's a little bit more rebellious, not officially tied with the rebellion, and she's more of a criminal and he's more uptight, but it turns out he's actually not that kind of character. They did something with this character that I actually kind of appreciated. His character is kind of a way to show off that the rebellion isn't so squeaky clean themselves. There are some calls that his character has to make that when I saw, I was like, oh my god, that's kind of a douche move right there. And it just kind of showed that the rebellion has good elements, and then there's also the bad elements that they're kind of forced to do, which is actually a good way to make this movie feel like a realistic war film. And by the way, this is the first Star Wars movie that feels like an actual war. My favorite new character though, hands down, he's partnered up with Cassian. It's K2SO, a reprogrammed Imperial droid. He was so funny in this movie. He literally had the best comedic lines. Everyone in the theater was dying laughing at him. And it also really helps that his CGI motion capture done by Alan Tudyk actually made it look like he was with these actors. Obviously it wasn't real because it was a motion capture performance, but when I saw it I was like, how could that not be real? That looks like it was actually there with them. And Alan Tudyk, the Disney superstar right now, he did a fantastic job as K2SO. He had the perfect voice. Honestly, I can't hear another voice coming out of his mouth at this point. Another cool addition to this movie was Chirrut Îmwe, played by Donnie Yen, who's a blind Force user who isn't really a Jedi. He was a really fun character because he had this really cool stick that he beat the crap out of people with. Like when he gets like hand to hand with people, it's so badass. And even his stick like sticks out and it turns into a blaster, which also looked really cool in this movie. And his character worked very well with another character played by Jiang Wen named Blaise Malbus. Blaise Malbus is a really tough character that has a huge weapon that can kill like 100 people in like 5 seconds. It was so cool to see. And he and Donnie Yen, most importantly, had terrific chemistry with each other. Just by watching them for a couple seconds, you can kind of get the sense that they do have a rich history with each other, that they do kind of hint at in their setups. And I really bought into their friendship that way. I honestly was really enjoying them throughout the course of the movie. Riz Ahmed has been really impressing me lately with movies like Nightcrawler, Jason Bourne, and now his role as Bodhi Rook in Rogue One: A Star Wars story. He was really good in this movie. He plays a pilot for the Empire who wants to defect to the rebellion for reasons I won't spoil, and his character actually did have a pleasant arc that didn't feel pointless, but it didn't take away from the overall message of the movie, which is another thing I did like about this movie, is that there are a lot of characters in this movie, a lot of characters you have to follow, and I think Gareth Edwards did a really good job making sure that they all felt necessary in this story instead of just being there to be there, pretty much. Another thing I really enjoyed about the characters was the huge amount of suspense I had for them in an action scene, because this isn't a prequel to characters that we know. These are all brand new characters. We have not seen them in other films, and we do not know if they survive. So when I was watching this movie, I felt the most tension I think I've ever felt in a Star Wars movie. Every scene I was very uncertain if a character was going to get shot or maybe they were going to be taken away. I didn't know what was going to happen to these characters, and I really loved how much suspense I had. I was literally on the edge of my seat in tension during a lot of the action scenes in this movie. Continuing on with the characters, Forrest Whitaker does show up as Saw Gerrera, the character from the Clone Wars animated show, and I like seeing this character again, even though he isn't in it a whole lot. I like seeing the older version of him. I could see some people maybe being turned off by his voice, but I thought he did a fine job. And this is similar to another thing I'll be talking about later on. Don't go into this movie expecting to see a lot of him. He's in it, not in it a whole lot, but when he's there, it's pretty good. Just don't expect him to be in the entire movie. Orson Krennic, played by Ben Mendelsohn, I thought he was perfect for this Imperial officer role. He was over the top, but in a very Star Wars-esque way that was perfect. And even as a character, you listen to some of his dialogue and you see some of his actions, and you can honestly get a sense of what this character is all about. Now, some people might complain that Ben Mendelsohn is more of the main villain than Darth Vader himself, but I think Mendelsohn did a fine job standing out on his own. And speaking of Vader, I guess we do have to talk about him. Apparently, a lot of people are very surprised and disappointed that he's not in the movie a whole lot. Even though in every trailer they showed him in, it was just one scene, and this movie is more focused on expanding the universe with these new characters. Apparently people were really disappointed by this after only seeing 1 second of Vader in each trailer in a movie that is supposed to expand the universe. Yes, Vader isn't in it a whole lot. However, the scenes that he's in, totally, 100% satisfying, especially one scene that I will not spoil, but when it was happening, I had the biggest, kid smile on my face. It was the best thing ever. I thought his screen time was honestly really perfect, and I think it's a really unfair criticism to compare this movie to Gareth Edwards' Godzilla by saying he and Darth Vader aren't even the main focus in it. Rogue One isn't a Vader-centric movie. I can understand people being disappointed by the lack of Godzilla because it's called Godzilla, but this is Rogue One, a Star Wars story, not Vader, a Star Wars story. And speaking of Godzilla, all of the technical aspects of that movie I was really impressed by, and it was the same thing here with Rogue One. I honestly don't think Gareth Edwards gets enough praise as a director, because he is really fantastic. The cinematography is so good in this movie. Honestly, this might be my favorite Star Wars movie as far as cinematography goes. Overall, it's still Empire, but this movie, cinematography-wise, it's the best one. The shots were just marvelous to gaze at, and even the visual effects they had in it was just, they were so realistic. And I know I've said this in my trailer reviews from the first looks of it, but the ships, the vehicles, and even the Death Star itself, it all looked like models. Honestly, Disney has been on a roll this year as far as special effects go. Jungle Book, the BFG, Doctor Strange, and now this movie, and even the practical effects, which they also did very well in The Force Awakens, I thought looked really good in this movie too. It was a nice blend from live-action people to seeing these puppets and animatronics running around, and also a nice blend with the CGI that's going on. It didn't really look off-putting to me. I just want to say, it was so awesome seeing the original Death Star on screen once again. Now, I know some people might say, well, Starkiller Base was his Death Star. Yeah, but that's not the original Death Star. That's a planet-sized Death Star, and this is the original Death Star that looks exactly like the Death Star, and I was so happy seeing it again. And another thing that I really enjoyed about this movie is Gareth Edwards' understanding of scale. The ships, the Death Star, and other things, the scale of it, it honestly does give you a sense of gloom. And it also adds great tension into the movie, especially when the AT-ATs show up on that beach that we've seen a lot in the trailers. That was honestly so fantastic. And speaking of tension, the last 40 minutes of this movie, I can't sing it enough praises. I would describe Rogue One as this. The first hour and 20 minutes is pretty good stuff, but then when you kick in the last 40 minutes of this movie, oh my god! At one scene, I was laughing and having fun with what was going on, being amazed by the visual effects and cinematography I was being shown, and then in the next scene, having my mouth drop at something I was not expecting, then going back to having fun, having my mouth drop, being amazed at visuals. There's so much to love about that climax. It is honestly the best climax to a movie of the whole year. And another thing I really love about it, it literally doesn't stop until the last 30 seconds of the movie, and I'm not kidding. It doesn't stop until the last 30 seconds. You are constantly just on the edge of your seat during this climax. It is the best climax of the year! Talk about a climax. The third act of this movie alone is worth the price of admission. Oh, and when I said that there were surprises in this movie, don't think that this is another Ghostbusters situation where they rely too much on fan service to make their movie good, because it's not like that at all. It has its own interesting story to tell that just so happens to have brief callback moments to the other Star Wars films. And they're very quick, like if you sneezed for a second and you closed your eyes while doing that, or if you looked away for a second, you would probably miss them. I do have two flaws with this movie though. Even though the CGI was blowing my mind, every scene, there was one choice made with it that's a motion capture thing that when I first saw it I was like, okay, maybe this can work, but then it starts moving around and talking and I was like, oh, that looks like something right out of a video game. And even though the characters overall were very enjoyable to watch, very likable, very funny, I think the setups for them in the first act I think could have been a little bit better, maybe something they could have fixed editing-wise, or maybe in the script, maybe that was the problem. It just felt a little bit choppy. I think they could have done a better job introducing these characters. But overall, Rogue One, A Star Wars Story was everything this movie needed to be. It had the perfect tone, the perfect characters, and the perfect amount of action. This movie is so skillfully directed that anyone who says they were underwhelmed walking out of this movie, I'm sorry, but you must be a liar. Especially after watching that climax, there is no way anyone can walk out of this movie going, I wasn't surprised by that at all. How? I'm gonna give Rogue One, A Star Wars Story an A-. It's a fantastic Star Wars film that actually managed to do things differently than most Star Wars films, which I actually did appreciate. I appreciated the risks that they took with this movie. And even though I wouldn't say it's as good as what The Force Awakens was, I still want to see this movie multiple more times. It is still a fantastic Star Wars film. Disney is honestly the best thing to have happened to the Star Wars franchise. George Lucas, take some notes, because that's how you do a prequel. But if you've seen Rogue One, A Star Wars Story, leave in the comments below what you thought of it, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.